If things were different, I'd have met you first." Those words, whispered with an intensity that stole her breath, became the haunting overture to a secret that would unravel a family. Welcome back to Hidden Love Stories. Today, we're diving deep into a story about a quiet longing that ignites a forbidden spark, forever changing the lives it touches. What happens when the need to be seen pushes you across a line you swore you'd never approach? Before we begin, make sure you subscribe, like, and hit that notification bell because you won't want to miss the emotional journey ahead. And tell me, have you ever felt so invisible that any attention felt like a lifeline? It's been 2 years since that night, 2 years since the rain, since everything inside me shifted, quietly, painfully, and never quite settled back into place. I remember the smell of the rain that day, soft and steady, as if trying to wash something away. I was in the kitchen, barefoot, wiping down the counter, a mindless chore I often did when my thoughts grew too loud. The kind of loud that echoes from the inside, where regrets and what-ifs whisper relentlessly. My daughter, Megan, then 30, was upstairs, her laughter, bright and carefree, drifting down as she chatted on the phone with a college friend. Her husband, James, a man of 33, was helping me bring in the groceries. Just a normal Saturday, I think. But the worst moments, they never send a warning, do they? They just arrive, uninvited, in the midst of the ordinary. He handed me a bag of apples. I reached out. For a fleeting second, our fingers brushed. It should have meant nothing, a common, inconsequential contact. But something in the way he looked at me then, an intensity, a flicker of something I couldn't name, made my chest tighten, my breath catch. It was as if he saw something in me, some forgotten part of Carol, the 55-year-old woman standing before him, that no one else had bothered to see in a long, long time. I didn't say anything. What could I say? Thank you for seeing the woman I myself forgot I was. I should have laughed it off, turned away, dismissed it as my imagination, the desperate projection of my own profound loneliness, the aching silence of a marriage that had gone cold decades ago, a house that only truly came alive when the kids visited. But I didn't walk away. And he didn't look away. And that infinitesimal moment of shared, loaded silence was the beginning of the end. You ever experience a moment where every rational fiber of your being screams, "This is wrong, deeply wrong"? But another part, something just as loud, just as insistent, whispers, "But God, it feels good to be truly seen again." Yeah, that was me. That was the precipice we stood on. This wasn't a planned mistake, not a calculated seduction. It was a slow creep, like water seeping under a locked door. And by the time you notice the flood, it's already too late. You're already drowning. I had locked eyes with a man who was never, ever meant to look at me like that. My daughter's husband. And what I did next, what I allowed to happen, still haunts every waking moment and most of my sleeping ones. I wasn't always this faded version of myself. I used to be vibrant, the kind of woman who laughed loud in restaurants, danced barefoot in the kitchen while cooking, who could make people feel warm just by walking into a room. But over time, slowly, almost imperceptibly, something shifted. Not a dramatic break, just a gradual, relentless dimming of my own light. Now I clean dishes that are barely used, fold clothes no one notices are clean, and offer polite, tired smiles to my husband, Robert, who rarely looks up from his book or his phone. We don't fight anymore. The energy for that evaporated years ago. We don't kiss either. We simply coexist, two ghosts passing each other in hallways. He reads, I clean. And maybe that's what hurts the most. not the overt cruelty, but the soul-crushing normality of our silent, disconnected lives. Megan, my only daughter, my light, she used to be my shadow, my confidant. But now she's married, busy building her own vibrant life, which is exactly what I raised her to do, what I wanted for her. So why does her happiness, her completeness sometimes leave such an ache in my own heart? She married James. God help me. He's charismatic, kind, too kind sometimes. He opens doors, remembers birthdays, looks people directly in the eye when they speak. He listens, really listens, a rare quality. When they visit, the house transforms. Megan's laughter fills the rooms like rediscovered sunlight. James moves through the kitchen with an easy familiarity, as if he belongs there, always offering to help, making light conversation, noticing the smallest things, a new plant, a different brand of coffee. One day he asked if I'd changed my hair. I hadn't. But no one, not even Robert, had asked me a question like that, a question that implied they saw me in years. That's when it truly started, I think. Not with a touch, not with a word even, but with the simple, profound act of being noticed. The moment they walk in, the house feels alive again. And for those few precious hours, I feel like a person, a woman, not just a role I inhabit. And James, he never explicitly crosses a line. He's always respectful, warm, observant. But sometimes, when I speak, when I share some mundane detail about my day, I see something flicker in his eyes, something careful, intensely curious. Like he's genuinely wondering about the woman hidden behind the worn apron, behind the quiet, practiced smile. And I, God forgive me, I let him wonder, because it's been so long, so achingly long since anyone has bothered to. I don't flirt, I don't plan anything illicit, but I do find myself wearing lipstick when they come over now. I cook the dishes I know he particularly likes, and I tell myself it's just hospitality, just good manners, just me being a welcoming mother-in-law. But in the quiet, treacherous corners of my mind, I know it's more than that. I know I anticipate the sound of their car in the driveway with a flutter I haven't felt since I was a girl. I know I glance at my reflection a little too often before I open the door. I know that when James smiles at me, that warm, genuine smile, I feel something stir, something I thought I had buried deep beneath years of neglect and quiet resignation. My daughter is glowing, blissfully unaware. Her husband is thoughtful, attentive, and I am invisible to everyone except the one man I should never, ever want to be seen by in that way. That's where I was, a 55-year-old woman in a quiet house, suffocating from a longing I couldn't name, until James looked at me and made me remember with a painful jolt that I still existed. It was a Saturday, warm, bright, the kind of deceptive early summer day that makes everything look fine from the outside, no matter the turmoil within. We were having a small barbecue in the backyard, just the four of us, Megan, James, Robert, and me. The grill was smoking, drinks were cold, and laughter, mostly from Megan, came easily. She always brings the joy with her, like a tangible thing she never forgets to pack. Robert was in his usual spot, same lawn chair, same damn book in his lap, half listening, half reading, fully somewhere else. I've stopped trying to reach for him years ago. It's like calling into a well that never echoes back, a bottomless pit of indifference. Megan was buzzing around, chattering excitedly about a potential work promotion. Then her phone rang. She checked the screen, smiled an apology, and said, "I'll be right back, Mom." She disappeared into the house, still talking animatedly, already lost in another conversation, another world. And just like that, it was me and James. Alone. He was by the grill, expertly flipping chicken, holding a beer, looking so effortlessly at ease in our space. And I was sitting beside a bowl of rapidly cooling corn on the cob, pretending to adjust napkins that didn't need adjusting, acutely aware of his presence, of the sudden shift in the atmosphere. Then he said, his voice calm, "You've got a peaceful home, Carol." I managed a smile, a small, brittle thing. "It's quiet, at least," I replied, the words tasting like a lie even as I said them. He looked at me then, and this time he really looked. Not like a son-in-law making polite conversation, not like a casual acquaintance, but like a man genuinely trying to understand something hidden. Like he saw someone beneath the surface, the woman I used to be, the woman I had almost entirely forgotten. We talked, not about anything overtly dangerous, not yet, just about aging, about the quiet compromises of long-term marriage, about how swiftly time moves when no one's really paying attention. I told him a story about how Megan, as a little girl, used to beg me to paint her nails glittery blue and make pancakes shaped like hearts. He laughed, a warm, genuine sound, and said she still asked him to do both, though usually only the pancakes now. I asked him how marriage felt, truly felt. He paused, his gaze drifting to the perfectly manicured lawn. "It's good," he said, then hesitated. "Megan's wonderful. I just think sometimes I wasn't ready for how much of yourself you have to give up to make it work, you know?" I didn't respond right away because I knew exactly what he meant, the words echoing the erosion of my own identity over decades. I had given up pieces of myself, some freely, some unknowingly, until there was precious little left that felt like me. And that silence, that shared, unspoken understanding of a truth too delicate to voice fully, it sat between us for a long, charged second. Then he looked directly at me, his eyes serious, and said, "You know, Carol, sometimes I wonder if things had been different." My heart didn't just stop. It felt like it stuttered, missed a crucial beat. He wasn't smiling, his eyes didn't wander. He just held my gaze, steady and quiet, and then he said it, the words that would become the invisible thread tying me to a future of regret. "If things were different, if I'd known you then, I think I'd have met you first." The world didn't spin. The birds didn't stop singing their cheerful, oblivious tunes. The chicken on the grill didn't suddenly burn, but something inside me, something brittle and long neglected, cracked. It was so soft, so slow, I almost didn't hear it, but I felt it, a deep internal fissure. Because no one, absolutely no one, had said anything remotely like that to me in over a decade, maybe two. No one had made me feel wanted, not just appreciated for a well-cooked meal or a tidy house, not just thanked for a task completed, but truly, deeply wanted as a woman. I didn't know what to say, so I said nothing. I just sat there, staring at the steam rising from the grill like smoke from a fire I hadn't intended to start, a fire that was now threatening to rage out of control. And somewhere in the distance, carried on the gentle summer breeze, I heard Megan laughing into her phone, her voice bright and full of a happiness I suddenly, desperately envied. That was the moment, the one I should have shut down with a sharp word, a cold look, a swift retreat. The one I should have erased from my memory. But I didn't. I held on to it. I remembered every word, every charged pause, every lingering glance. And later that night, lying in the cold expanse of my marital bed, beside a husband who hadn't truly touched me in months, who was already asleep, his back turned to me, I closed my eyes and replayed a voice that didn't belong to him. a voice that spoke of a different, forbidden possibility. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling as if it held the answers to questions I was too afraid to voice. But the only thing I could see was his face. James's. His words didn't just echo. They lingered, soft and still, like something sacred I wasn't meant to touch, yet had brushed against anyway. If things were different? I whispered it to myself, a dangerous litany, part question, part sin. And the guilt, it came quick and sharp, a hot slap to my chest. I turned to look at Robert, my husband, his back to me as always, already lost in a peaceful sleep I hadn't felt beside him in years. We shared a bed, a house, a history, but we no longer shared touch or meaningful conversation or even presence. It wasn't just the absence of romance, it was the absence of seeing, of being seen, noticed, chosen. James had noticed me, and that simple act of acknowledgement was enough to stir something within me I thought had withered and died a long, long time ago. I kept asking myself, what is this feeling? Is it desire? Is it a desperate need for validation? Or is it just profound, soul-crushing loneliness dressed up as fleeting attention? It felt wrong, undeniably wrong, but it also felt like taking a full, deep breath after years of being slowly, quietly submerged. Is that what betrayal is? Because if it is, it doesn't always scream its arrival. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it comes gently, with a smile that lingers a fraction too long, with words you didn't expect to crave with such intensity. I wrapped the blanket around myself tighter, but it wasn't the chill of the room I was trying to fight. It was the memory, the way he looked at me, not with overt hunger, but with something deeper, something I couldn't quite name, something that terrified me more than simple lust ever could. I thought about all the nights I'd walked past Robert, hoping, just once, he might reach for me. The times I'd put on perfume before dinner, not because anyone would notice, but because I missed the simple act of feeling like a woman. I thought about every time I'd caught my own reflection and looked away, because I no longer recognized the tired, faded woman staring back. But James, he didn't look away. He looked straight through the facade, like he saw all the hidden parts of me I tried so desperately to bury under endless chores and quiet, resigned smiles. And lying there in the suffocating darkness, I asked myself, is it truly betrayal to simply feel seen again? To remember what it felt like to be wanted, not for what I provided, but just for existing. I didn't have the answer then. I still don't. But that night, I held on to his words like a secret. Precious note slipped into my hand. I tucked it into the hollow of my chest, pressing it against the persistent ache that had lived there for years. I didn't ask for this. I hadn't gone looking for it. But when something starving is finally fed, even crumbs feel like a sumptuous feast. And somehow, even through the rising tide of guilt, I fell asleep with a strange, haunting comfort of being remembered, of being seen, a softness I hadn't known in so very long. The shift was subtle at first, insidious. The first time James came over without Megan, he claimed he was just dropping off a package she'd forgotten at their place. I smiled, kept the conversation light, my heart doing a strange little flutter kick. But inside, something tilted, a question mark hanging in the air I wasn't ready to examine. The second time, it was a casserole dish from a potluck. The third, some papers she'd supposedly left behind. By the fourth visit, the pretense was wearing thin. We weren't really pretending anymore, not to each other. We talked longer than we should have, about everything and nothing. The kind of meandering, intimate conversations I used to have when I was still someone's muse, not just someone's mother, not just the silent woman who folds the laundry and refills the sugar jar. He asked about my favorite music from my youth, my childhood dreams, my quiet regrets. I didn't lie, but I didn't spill the full, unvarnished truth either, because some truths sound too dangerous, too inviting when spoken out loud. There was a moment in the kitchen. I was plating some food for Megan, knowing she'd pick it up after her late shift at the hospital. He reached for a fork at the same time I did. Our hands brushed, a spark of static electricity in the humid afternoon air. It should have been nothing, an accidental contact. But it wasn't. The touch held, just a fraction of a second too long, long enough for something to pass between us. We didn't speak, just stood there, our palms still warm from the contact, staring at a plate of leftover pasta like it held the secrets of the universe, like it might somehow save us from ourselves. I pulled away first, feigning an itch in my eye. He cleared his throat, mumbled something about having to go. But the very next day, he came back. Said the garden fence was leaning, offered to fix it. I said yes, of course I said yes. He worked quietly in the backyard, focused, his shirt soon damp with sweat, the late afternoon sunlight catching the strong column of his neck. I brought him a tall glass of iced water. He looked up at me as I approached, his work shirt already discarded, his chest gleaming. And I swear, in that moment, time slowed to a crawl. It wasn't lust, not then, not entirely. It was the profound, desperate hunger to matter again, to be noticed, to be looked at like a woman, not just a convenient placeholder in someone else's life story. I stood there a moment too long, held the glass a little too tight. He reached for it, and our fingers brushed again, a deliberate, lingering contact this time. Neither of us moved away. There was heat, not from the sun, not from the humid air, but from us. He said nothing. I said nothing. But everything unspoken between us was deafeningly loud. That night, sleep was an impossibility, again. I tried to pray, tried to bargain with a God I wasn't sure I believed in anymore, tried to talk myself out of whatever insidious thing I felt this was becoming. But desire, I was learning, is quiet and terrifyingly patient. It doesn't need explicit permission. It just needs a crack, a tiny fissure in the defenses. And my defenses, after years of neglect, were riddled with them. And then, one rainy evening, he stayed too long, or perhaps exactly as long as we both, secretly, wanted him to. Robert was out of town, another work trip, just 3 days this time. Megan had called earlier, a quick, cheerful check-in before she left, telling me to rest and casually asking James to check in on Mom while she was gone. She'd smiled through the video call, her happiness a bright, painful stab, like nothing in her world was, or could ever be, wrong. And maybe for her, truly, nothing was. That evening, the sky turned a bruised gray too early. Thunder rumbled in the distance, the kind that hums deep in your chest before it even properly reaches your ears. James showed up at the door with a bag of groceries, a thoughtful offering, saying Megan had called him, worried we were out of a few essentials. It was a lie, of course, a soft, transparent one, the kind you tell when you both already know the unspoken truth, but still need the flimsy excuse to keep pretending, to inch closer to the flame. I should have sent him home. I should have smiled politely, thanked him for his thoughtfulness, and closed the door gently, firmly, behind him. But I didn't. Instead, I invited him in, my voice sounding strangely calm to my own ears, telling him the storm looked like it might get worse, suggesting he stay until the rain let up. A silent invitation. We cooked together, nothing fancy. Pasta again, garlic bread, a salad we barely touched. And somewhere between slicing tomatoes and stirring the simmering pot of sauce, The power went out, just like that. A sharp click, then sudden enveloping darkness, a profound silence broken only by the increasing intensity of the rain against the windows. He laughed softly in the dark, a comforting sound. I fumbled for candles, my hands surprisingly steady, the flickering kind that make everything feel slower, softer, more intimate, more dangerous. We sat at the small kitchen table, 2 glasses of wine poured but barely touched between us. And for the first time in weeks, we didn't talk, not because there was nothing to say, but because everything, absolutely everything, was already being said in the charged, suffocating silence. The candlelight caught the sharp edge of his jaw, the gentle curve of his mouth. He was watching me, not with overt hunger, but with an ache that mirrored my own. I looked away, feigning interest in the glass in my hand, in the flame that danced too close to the inferno I was trying so desperately to hold back. Then he stood up, moved slowly, deliberately, around the table, and stopped directly behind my chair. I could feel the warmth of his body before I felt his hand. And then he touched my shoulder just lightly, a feather-soft pressure, but it was enough. It undid something vital in me, something I had kept locked away, fiercely guarded for far too long. I stood, turned, and finally met his eyes in the wavering candlelight. He didn't lean in immediately. He waited, careful, patient, still giving me that infinitesimal chance to end it, to step back from the precipice. But I didn't. Our lips met, a slow, intentional collision, not an accident, not a careless slip, but a conscious, mutual choice, a quiet, devastating breaking of vows, of trust, of everything that should have been sacred. And when we pulled apart, breathless, we didn't speak. We just stared at each other, shocked by the sudden stillness in the eye of our self-made storm. He whispered, his voice rough, "Tell me to stop, Carol." And I didn't. I should have. God, I should have screamed it, shoved him away, thrown open the door, and let the actual storm outside swallow him whole. But I didn't. I just stood there, trembling, every nerve ending alight, feeling more terrifyingly, dangerously alive than I had in years. And that's what broke me most. Not the kiss, not the guilt that was already beginning to coil in my stomach, but how intensely, how undeniably alive it made me feel. How alive he made me feel. The heavy silence descended again. No breath, no music, just the sound of 2 people standing far too close to the edge of an abyss, neither one willing or perhaps able to move back. I woke up alone. The bed, my bed, the one I no longer truly shared with Robert, was cold. The house was still, too still. James was gone. No note, no sound of the front door closing, just his absence, thick and heavy like the aftermath of a storm you'd pretended wasn't coming, even as the sky turned black. I sat on the edge of the bed, the discarded silk robe pooled at my feet, my own blanket clutched around my shoulders, head in my hands. The faint, masculine scent of him was still there, clinging to the pillows, to my skin. His warmth had barely faded from the air, but he was gone, and everything, absolutely everything, felt irrevocably wrong. I wanted to believe I'd imagined it, that maybe it wasn't real, that I dreamed the way he touched me, kissed me, looked at me like I mattered, like I was the only woman in the world. But my lips still tingled, a phantom pressure, and my chest ached with a hollow, tearing pain, like something vital had been ripped from it. The guilt came fast then, faster than I could breathe, settling in my bones, sour and sharp. Then I heard her car in the driveway. Megan, home early from her weekend trip with friends, her laughter bright as she called out a greeting, her arms predictably full of shopping bags and stories. She kissed my cheek, told me I looked tired. I smiled, a ghastly imitation of maternal warmth, said I hadn't slept well. A small, pathetic truth buried under a mountain of unspeakable lies. She chattered about her trip, about a new bakery she'd discovered, about James calling her every night, telling her how much he missed her. And all I could hear was the frantic rushing of blood in my ears, the deafening roar of my own deceit, because he hadn't looked at me, not once with that feigned innocence, since that night. He came in an hour later, quiet, infuriatingly casual, kissed Megan on the forehead, called her baby, laughed at her jokes, sat beside her on the couch like nothing had happened, like the world hadn't tilted on its axis, and maybe for him, truly nothing significant had. But for me, everything had changed. He barely glanced in my direction, and when he did, his eyes were quick, too quick, like he couldn't risk what unspoken truth might show on his face or what he might see in mine. I felt sick, physically sick. My stomach twisted, my hands shook so badly I spilled tea on the kitchen counter and then cried fat, ugly tears, blaming it on cutting onions. There were no onions. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. Every shared glance between Megan and James, every casual touch, felt like a deliberate, twisting knife. And still I smiled. I smiled so hard my face ached. I started watching them, not out of simple jealousy, but out of a gnawing, consuming fear. Fear that Megan might see it, the invisible, charged space between James and me. The thing that wasn't there before but now took up every corner of every room, suffocating me. I hated him then. I hated how easily he slipped back into his role, into her world, leaving me alone with the wreckage. And I hated myself more, so much more, for letting it happen, for wanting it, for needing that fleeting, destructive spark. And then Megan sat beside me on the couch one afternoon, her voice soft, her eyes shining with a pure, unadulterated joy that felt like another form of torture. She said, "Mom, we're trying for a baby." And just like that, I felt the room tilt, the floor vanishing beneath me. She was glowing, hopeful, breathtakingly innocent. And I was a festering wound in her beautiful love story, a secret she hadn't even discovered yet, a betrayal that could destroy everything she held dear. The days after her announcement blurred into a gray, indistinguishable fog of guilt and despair. I wandered through the house like a ghost in my own skin, touching familiar objects, noticing minute details, as if grief and shame had cruelly sharpened all my senses. I ran my hand across the smooth, worn banister Megan used to slide down when she was a giggling little girl, paused by the hallway where her joyful laughter once echoed, opened the door to her old bedroom, now a guest room, even though she no longer lived there. I sat on her childhood bed, clutching one of her old, faded stuffed animals against my chest. It still smelled faintly of her, of vanilla shampoo, and something innocent, something pure that I felt I had irrevocably tainted. Downstairs, I pulled out old photo albums, the ones where we're all smiling, where everything looks so deceptively right, so perfect. I stared at a picture of James standing beside Megan at some long-forgotten family gathering, his arm around her waist, both of them beaming with happiness. And all I could see was the ugly, festering lie buried deep behind his smile, behind hers, my lie. I hated myself with a fresh, violent intensity for what I'd done. But even more, I hated how desperately, how shamefully, I wished I could go back to that single moment in the candlelight and do it all again. I kept walking, room to silent room, opening closets, burying my face in shirts Robert hadn't worn in years, holding on to the fabric as if it might somehow stitch the frayed edges of my life, my conscience, back together. But it didn't. because something essential had already torn. And I was the one who had made the first fatal cut. I stood in the nursery, the room we'd started clearing out years ago for guests when Megan left for college. Now, it might soon become something else. A baby's room again, filled with a crib, soft blankets, tiny, perfect socks. And I wondered, with a cold dread that settled deep in my bones, what would it feel like to hold that child, her child, their child, to press my lips to its innocent forehead, knowing I had helped break the very foundation that made its precious life possible? To watch my daughter become a mother while I carried a secret that could and probably would destroy hers? I imagined James rocking their baby to sleep, reading bedtime stories in his warm, reassuring voice, kissing Megan on the cheek while she cradled their child in her arms. And I wanted to scream, because how do you look at that kind of pure, hopeful love and not wonder if it's all built on a monstrous lie? Was what we did, he and I, just a fleeting moment of human weakness, a desperate collision of two lonely souls? Or was it the beginning of an insidious rot that would one day reach out and poison everything, everyone I held dear? I thought about confessing so many times. I rehearsed the words in my head over and over, how I'd say it, what I'd say, when the right moment might be. But each time I opened my mouth, the words caught in my throat like shards of jagged glass. Because once those words leave you, they don't come back. They hang in the air forever, changing everything. And so I said nothing. I can't undo what I did, but every time I hug my daughter, every time she calls me mom, with that unwavering trust and love in her voice, I feel like I'm stealing something precious from her, like I've carved out a piece of her life, her happiness, that she'll never even know is missing. I don't know what mercy looks like anymore. I don't know if telling the truth would be an act of kindness or the ultimate cruelty. But maybe, just maybe, this suffocating silence is the only twisted mercy I can offer her now. Have you ever made one decision, one single solitary choice, that irrevocably rewrote everything you thought you knew about yourself, about your life, about morality? Not a loud, dramatic decision, not the kind you scream about in heated arguments or confess tearfully in a sterile courtroom, but the quiet kind, the insidious kind, the kind that creeps into your bones late at night and simply won't let you sleep. I did, and now I barely recognize the woman who stares back at me from the mirror. She looks like me, she moves like me, she even smiles when she has to, a hollow imitation of warmth. But inside, she's not whole. She's just holding together the shattered pieces of something broken, pretending it's still somehow beautiful. I ask myself every single day, was it weakness? Was it unadulterated selfishness? Or was it just a profound, aching loneliness disguised as a fleeting moment of courage, a desperate, primal longing to be seen, to be wanted, to feel real again, if only for an hour? That's the part no one tells you about betrayal, about infidelity. Sometimes it doesn't start with wild, consuming lust. Sometimes it starts with emptiness, with silence, with a gnawing hunger to matter again to someone, anyone. And once you feed that hunger, even for a moment, even with forbidden fruit, it never, ever stops whispering its seductive, destructive song. So I need to ask you something, honestly, gently. What would you have done in my place? Tell me your truth in the comments below. I'll read every word, not to judge, simply to understand, to feel a little less alone in this self-made haunting. If this story pulled something from deep inside you, if it made you remember or question or simply feel, then don't keep that silence to yourself. Like this story, Subscribe to Hidden Love Stories. This is where silence so often becomes a story, where shame can sometimes find a language, and where your deepest secrets don't always have to stay hidden. Tap that notification bell. The next tale we share might just echo something you've never, ever dared to say aloud, a secret you thought was yours, and yours alone. Some betrayals don't explode like bombs, destroying everything in an instant. They bleed slowly, insidiously, staining everything we love in a creeping, pervasive silence. They live in the way we hold back our words, in the way we learn to avoid certain glances, in the way we hug those we've wronged a little too tight, as if that pressure could somehow keep the truth from spilling out because we're terrified it might be the last time we ever deserve to. I thought being seen was enough. That maybe if someone, anyone, noticed me, if someone touched me like I still mattered, it would somehow make the long, barren years of emptiness worth it. But I forgot what it means to truly see someone else, to see their innocence, their unwavering trust, their boundless love, and to betray that, even quietly, even just once, is to light a match inside the very home you helped build, and then stand back and watch the flames begin to lick at the foundations. If you're standing on the edge of something that feels too sweet, too intoxicating to possibly be wrong, I beg you, please, step back. Because some desires come dressed in alluring kindness, but they inevitably leave dressed in a lifetime of bitter, corrosive regret. And if you're still tempted to judge me, don't. Just ask yourself with brutal honesty, what might you have done if you'd felt completely, utterly invisible for years?